Readings today, we hear the story of the two divine swans. And Samurai Mama has graciously posted two swan icons. I don't know where you get these. Let me see. Aha, I found it. So I will respond in kind. This is the story of the two divine swans. So in order to hear this story, we finish the story of the king, the allegory of the king, and then we begin the story of his reincarnation as the queen. That will be told quickly, and then we're going to hear about at the end of her life, we're going to get the story of the two swans. Let's begin. That's also a very cool icon, Bella. All right. So Vidarbhi, who's Vidarbhi? Vidarbhi is the king. But the next life, the king is born as the daughter of Vidarbha. So we call her Vidarbhi. Princess, she marries Malayadhvaj. Vidarbhi married Malayadhvaj, the prince of Pandya, who won her devotion by his valor in flawlessly conquering all the princes of other lands. So here's a note, because we're coming right after hearing that the king was now reincarnated as a queen. So what's being indicated by that part of the allegory is when the soul, remember the main character, the king, the queen, is the soul, and then the spouse is the intellect. So the spouse can be male or female depending on whether the soul is male or female. But the soul is not permanently male or female. The soul just has male or female disposition. When the soul has a male disposition, so for example in the story when it was the king, its partner, the intellect, is a wife. Wife is someone who makes life pleasant and enjoyable. When the soul has a female disposition, when it's Princess Vidarbhi, its partner, the intellect, is a husband, someone who protects us from harm. The princess selected Malayadhvaj of Pandya to be her husband. Okay, so I don't know. We talked a little bit about that previous bit last week. So hopefully you're already clear on what that practically means. It means that when the soul has a male disposition, the intellect is geared towards what it can get from the world, whereas when the soul has a female disposition, the intellect is more geared to how to not make a mistake and how to be safe. The princess selected Malayadhvaj of Pandya to be her husband. So the intellect in this case is this prince called Malayadhvaj. Malayadhvaj of Pandya. Pandya is the country that he's from. This signifies the feminine soul desiring the protection of supreme wisdom. So this is because the word Malayadhvaj means the mountaintop, and Pandya means wisdom. So you actually probably have heard these two words before: Himalaya and Pandit. So Malayadhvaj, Malaya is Himalaya. Malaya Dvaja. Dvaja is the top or the flag or the thing that sticks out on the top. And Pandya is Pundit. So Pandit means a smart person, Himalaya means a mountain. So the topmost wisdom, that's what Malayadhvaj of Pandya signifies. This queen Vidarbhi, remember the word Vidarbhi means she's not going to do conventional religion. Darbha means Darbha grass. Vidarbha means she does not carry Darbha grass. Darbha grass is one of the key ingredients for Vedic religion. So that means that she's not going to get into Vedic religion. She wants the supreme thing. She wants the supreme wisdom. Okay, so Vidarbhi marries Malyadvaj, the prince of Pandya, who won her devotion by his valor in flawlessly conquering all the princes of other lands. That shows that this is the supreme wisdom that she wants to marry. When the king finally becomes this queen, female character, she wants wisdom to protect her. And she wants the highest wisdom, not conventional wisdom. They had a daughter named Dark Eyes. She and her 7 brothers became masters of the South. Each child had countless children and grandchildren who maintained the South for beyond even the ages of Manu. So what's this signifying? The daughter named Dark Eyes, which is Asitekshana. The meaning of the word dark eyes, Asitekshana, means to look into the unknown. To see the unknown, to see into the darkness, to look into the darkness. So this symbolizes that what Vidarbhi wanted most from her wisdom husband was to experience and understand the unknown root of reality. Krishna literally means the dark unknown. Asita. Krishna is a synonym with Asita. Krishna literally means something that's unknown and unseeable. So, this allegory here is the feminine soul Vidarbhi marries the topmost wisdom as her intellect. She doesn't select somebody that's going to show her how to enjoy. She selects somebody that's going to show her wisdom, truth. And the union between the two produces dark eyes, produces the ability to see into the unknown, the ability to discover the hidden root. Then she has 7 younger brothers, and her. They symbolize the consequent efforts to understand Krishna. The 7 younger brothers are symbols of the 7 primary efforts that a practitioner makes to see into the dark. And the south signifies the south of India, which is dominated by bhakti. It's been famous for centuries, actually. It's not just a modern thing. The modern thing is almost hilarious. North India is so completely different from South India. It's almost hilarious. It's almost as bad as North and South Korea. In that North India is very rough. Very lawless, whereas South India is much more like a typical Asian country, where people are lawful and well behaved. And also in South India, all of the huge temples, almost all the huge temples, with the exception of Jagannath and maybe the Dwarka or something. So some temples in north of India, but most of the big temples and everything is in the south. It's because over the centuries, for whatever reason, people say, what do they say? Anthropologists say it's because it's further from mixture with other cultures because of the way India is a peninsula. But over the centuries, the south has really been the stronghold of bhakti and the core of Vedic culture. So when Narada says they're the kings, they become the caretakers of the south, it means that they are related to bhakti. At least this is the way that the commentators on the Bhagavatam explained it. So the 7 younger brothers symbolize Vidarbhi's consequent efforts to understand Krishna. The south of India is dominated by bhakti traditions, hence the younger brothers symbolize 7 primary practices of bhakti yoga. So those are like hearing about. Thank you, Caribbean. So like hearing about, etc. Hearing about, discussing, remembering Krishna, etc. Okay, so let's just get the story in because there's so much explanation. Vidarbhi married Malyadvaj, the prince of Pandya, who won her devotion by his valor in flawlessly conquering all the princes of other lands. They had a daughter named Dark Eyes. She and her 7 younger brothers became the masters of the south. Each child had countless children and grandchildren who maintained the South far beyond even the ages of Manu. Dark Eyes, a very avowed and serious lady. So this is when she grows up. Let me say this. Dark Eyes grew up to become... Dark Eyes grew to become a very avowed and serious lady, period. She married Mind Sage and had only one son, Infallible Determination. He in turn had only one son named Eager Sacrifice. All right, so more explanation here. The marriage of Dark Eyes to Mind Sage, that's Augustia. Augustia means sage and Augustia means mind. Sage mind or mind sage. The marriage of Dark Eyes to Mind Sage, what does that symbolize? Remember, Dark Eyes is the desire to understand the unknown. And Mind Sage is passion. Right? The mind is emotion and passion. So the marriage of Mind Sage to Dark Eyes, it signifies the infusion of emotion and passion into the philosophical quest. Their son, Infallible Determination, the Tridhyachyuta, is the result of this infusion. If you have curiosity, then you don't really have infallible determination. Curiosity is just, oh, that sounds interesting. Infallible determination is come hell or high water, I'm going to do it. It's different than curiosity. When your curiosity marries your passion, then you can get infallible determination. So this is why the marriage of Dark Eyes, this is what the marriage of Dark Eyes to Mind Sage signified. And he in turn had only one son named Eager Sacrifice. The grandson Eager Sacrifice is the result of this determination, eagerness to sacrifice anything in the pursuit of one's transcendent goal. Once the children had grown up, the philosopher king Malayadvaj, I'm doing it as one word now, right? Let's make sure I did that the whole way. Once the children had grown up, the philosopher King Malayadvaj placed his kingdom in their care and went to the mountain of unmoving focus. Now from here, it doesn't really need much explanation. It's pretty obvious. He went to the mountain of unmoving focus, intent on worshiping Krishna. So now he's going to meditate. That's what that symbolizes. Queen Vidarbhi followed him, like light follows the moon, giving up her home, children, and comforts, for her eyes were also ever youthful in seeking the true essence of all joy. There the king cleansed himself inside and out by bathing regularly in 3 sacred rivers, Chandravasa, Tamraparni, and Vatodaka. Chandravasa is dressed by the moon. Tamraparni is decorated by the sun. And Vatodaka is nourished by the air. Gosh, I forgot what those 3 things signified. But I remember that we talked about them the first time we did the stream. And I'm sure I have notes of it somewhere. Maybe I will also include that here in the manuscript. It symbolizes something, but it's not particularly important. His discipline emaciated him, and he gradually ate only raw bulbs, seeds, roots, fruits, flowers, leaves, stalks, and water. He began to see all things equally, cold and heat, wind and rain, hunger and thirst, the desired and the undesired, the pleasant and the unpleasant, and thus he overcame the bias of polarities. The wisdom produced by his disciplines was a flame consuming all flaws and impurities. His rules and regulations allowed him to master his senses, breath, and mind, so he could adhere himself entirely to the Brahman, conscious essence of all things. He remained firmly like this for 100 celestial years, until he did not perceive or possess anything other than adoration for the all-attractive essence. And the note on this very long period of time, 100 celestial years, which is 36,000 terrestrial years, what's that? That is showing the purpose of that in this story is to show that the achievement of rati, which is what he achieves there, adoration, for the all-attractive essence, Bhagavan Vasudeva, is a very, very rare and difficult goal, which requires many lifetimes of continuous endeavor. 36,000 years is not something you're going to be able to do in one go. Then, he suddenly experienced that being everywhere and as everything, yet also unique and individual. This is such an important sentence. Then he suddenly experienced that being. So then means after meditating on it for thousands of years, suddenly he experienced it. And his experience of that being, that conscious essence of all things, was that it was everywhere and everything, yet also its own thing. Still, the experience was like a dream. Only his mind's eye witnessed it, so it was not yet fully satisfying. Eventually, the all-attractive Hari revealed himself directly, showing himself everywhere by infusing the king with the light of spotless comprehension. He saw that his own self was fully integrated in love with the Supreme, and that the Supreme was likewise fully integrated in love with him. Seeing this, he completely disintegrated from everything else. That's it. So he's gone. He disintegrated from everything, literally. So the intellect disintegrated. That releases the soul from the ability to manifest a body in the external world. Let me see what any things are coming up here. Samurai says, I remember it symbolizes the three types of tapas. He was naked, under whatever weather, and reducing his nourishment. Can you repeat the original union very shortly? Original union? I don't know. What do you mean by that? Eddie says, but where does he go? When you disintegrate, you return back into your constituents. Let me ask you this. If you take a bowl of rice, don't eat it, dump it on the floor, and then come and check it in a month. Where is it going? Come back in a year and check it. Where did it go? It disintegrates back into atoms. So that's what happens with the things. They disintegrate after the conscious force holding them together lets go of them. So when intellect disintegrates, it returns back to its constituent part, which is Prakriti. The original union of Krishna and the other, that was not mentioned. You mean Dark Eyes? The daughter Dark Eyes? So look. Yeah, that's Dark Eyes. Dark Eyes means the one who wants to see Krishna. So you have the previous character you're used to is Paranjana, the citizen, the king. Paranjana reincarnates as Vidarbhi. He still signifies the soul. Vidarbhi marries Malyadvaj, the highest wisdom. The soul with the highest wisdom produces a child called Dark Eyes, which means the one who wants to see Krishna, the one who wants to see the unknown. Dark Eyes marries a sage named Agastya. Dark Eyes marries passion. So that means when the philosophical desire marries passion or emotional, becomes emotional. See, most people are thinking that emotion and intellect, they don't work with each other. This is why, for example, crazy people. Amber Heard. We'll look at her chart in the next video I'm going to do. It's Mercury directly opposite from Moon. And that's, classic signature. Intellect and emotions, they wreck each other. But in bhakti, what you do is you put the emotions behind the intellect. They push the intellect. So that's what he's saying here. The Asita, Akshana, the dark seer, she married the emotions and the passions. So that she'll be directed by emotions and passions. No, Eddie, the intellect has disintegrated. It's not a person. The only person in the allegory is the soul. See, you're so male. You're thinking that this guy must be the main character. The only person in the story is, at this point, is Vidarbhi. The other stuff are functions. Her functions, personified as characters in the allegory. So then, after the kids grew up, then Malayadhvaj had no more worldly duties. He simply meditated. That's the wisdom, intellect, focusing on the Supreme, trying to understand Krishna. So he's meditating for thousands of years on the conscious essence of everything. After thousands of years, he has an experience of it, but it's still a non-sensual experience. It's an intellectual or mental experience. And then after further practice, it becomes a real experience, and that causes the intellect to integrate with that and disintegrate from everything else. So this is where Vidarbhi unhooks. This is where the soul will unhook from the ignorant existence and hook onto the real existence. Vidarbhi considered her husband Malayadhvaj to be divine because he comprehended and adhered to the supreme essence of reality. Out of love, she renounced all pleasures and took care of him carefully. Her clothes torn, her body emaciated, and her hair knotted in clumps, she shined peacefully near her husband, like the brilliant coals of a smokeless fire. When her dearmost passed away, his body remained in its meditative posture. Unaware of what had happened, she came to care for him. But when she noticed that there was no warmth at all on his feet, her heart despaired, like a doe whose mate is lost. Without a partner, she wept for her poor self. Tears of hopelessness drenched her breasts as she broke into a howling sob that echoed through the trees. "Wake up, O sage of kings! Wake up! The world surrounded by water is terrified of villains and warriors. You must protect her." Pleading like this, the girl who followed her husband into the wilderness fell down. Her tears washed his feet. Eventually, she collected wood and gathered it into a pyre. Eventually, she collected wood, gathered it into a pyre, and placed her husband's body atop it. Setting it ablaze, her hopeless heart wanted to die with him. "Oh, Prabhu," she cried. Now we come to the two swans story. Just then, someone appeared. The Prabhu appears. Prabhu is a name for Vishnu. It means the one who has Bu. Bu means power. Literally, it means the ability to make things exist. So Prabhu means like a creator or a person that has the power to make things happen or exist. So since it's the ability to make things happen, you can, in common term, use it in the same way that we use the term husband, or the same way that we use the term master or something. But actually, it's a name of Vishnu. So when she says, "Oh Prabhu," thinking about her husband, to her surprise, all of a sudden, somebody appears. Now we're going to hear this story. Just then, someone appeared beside her, a friendly, philosophical, self-possessed person whom she felt she somehow already knew. Finally, the very first line in the story was, once upon a time, there was a king who had a friend who he didn't know. And finally, after all the story, he appears here. The friend appears here. Just then, someone appeared beside her a friendly, philosophical, self-possessed person whom she felt she already knew. Calmly, he spoke sympathetic and conciliatory words to her. "Who are you?" he asked. "Who is this dead man you cry over?" "He is my husband and my guru," she replied. "And who am I?" he asked. "Do you know me?" "I think you are my friend," she replied, "whom I have wandered with since before I can remember." "But what about my first question?" he asked again. "Who are you?" "I cannot remember," she said. "I do not know who I truly am. I cannot make sense of it. Please explain. Help me make sense of my shattered memories." Now, the unknown friend explains, here's the real juice. "You and I, O noble one, are two swan friends. We rest out in nature without manifesting any nest, thousands of years. When your passion awakes, it is unaware of and uninterested in me. It flows away from me instead, wondering what sort of girls are out there in the great world." So this is an amazing opening statement. A lot of things in here. First point is, he says we're friends. And he says you're noble. He calls her noble. Let me just answer this person. I cannot remember. I do not. I'm sorry. "You and I, O noble one." Let me delete this so I don't get more distractions. "You and I, O noble one." So he calls her noble. And he calls her a friend. So friends are equals. This is the defining characteristic of friends. There's three basic intimate relationships are three basic types. The one where you're inferior, the one where you're equal, the one where you're superior. The one where you're superior is parenting, the one where you're equal is friendship, and the one where you're inferior is loving. So the fact that he says we're friends means we're equals. So that signifies that the soul and God are both noble. They're both royal. They both have the same glorious nature. It's the same. They're not different classes or different categories or in different hierarchies. Then he said that they don't manifest a nest. So that means that he says, remember he said we rest out in nature without manifesting any nest for thousands of years. So that means that the soul spends very long periods of time lying dormant and submerged in God, resting. The soul gets tired, just like we have a day and a night cycle. It's a natural thing. That you do stuff and then you get tired and then you rest. So that happens on little tiny scales, and it happens on bigger scales, and it happens on enormous scales. So this is sometimes mistaken for liberation. It's just when the soul becomes tired of action, but it hasn't given up its desire for the fruits of action. Then it will submerge itself into God so that it can sleep. And it becomes indistinguishable in there. Doesn't manifest a nest means that it has not made a body for itself. It doesn't make a body for itself. You and I, number one, are two swan friends. We rest out in nature without manifesting any nest for thousands of years. But when your passion awakes, so when that passion, the soul is tired of action, so it rests, but it's not tired of its desire for the results of action. When that desire for the result of actions becomes more and more itchy as it rests, then it eventually wakes it up and says, "Hey, don't you want to pursue me?" So then the soul says, "Oh yeah." But so the soul's attention is drawn towards the desires which are extrinsic to God. And so the note here is, oh, I didn't give a note. Maybe I think it's self-evident. When your passion awakes, it is unaware of and uninterested in me. it flows away from me instead, wondering what sort of girls are out there in the great world. So basically, the soul is moving away from the other soul, the super soul, because of a masculine attitude. Feminine makes relationship, masculine makes independence. And so it's looking at the world and thinking that it's a girl with a nice butt. And it's thinking, wow, I wonder what that girl is like. So it goes that way. Out there, you need a nest, a city. So in here, in this, when you're in me, you don't need a nest. But when you go out there, you realize I need a place to live. To inhabit this world, I need a place in it. Out there, you need a nest. So that means that you need to manifest a form, a body out there. These cities are actually the bodies you inhabit over many lifetimes. They have, now he's explaining the allegory. He's explaining her life, how she was looking for cities, etc., and all these people that she met in the city and what she did with the people. The allegory. So he's explaining that to her, and thus he's explaining the allegory. These cities are actually the bodies you inhabit over many lifetimes. They have 9 gates leading to 5 pleasant gardens. These are the 9 openings through which the master of the city can visit the gardens and enjoy their delightful objects for the 5 senses. Experiences from the gardens are brought back into the city, like fruits, and merged with the mind in 6 assemblies, intersections between the 5 senses and the mind. The city is held together and protected by a single guardian, which is the vital force, prana. It has 3 storehouses for nourishment, foods, lubrications, and metabolics, and 5 stores for selling the results of these 5 powers of action. The 5 building blocks of the city are the eternally manifest constituents of manifest reality: solids, liquids, energies, gases, and location. Your spouse, who rules the city, is actually your intellect. Entering the city through her, you identify fully with it and become unaware of anything else. You embrace your lover and enjoy, but never learn anything beyond that. This is why you have come to this pitiful state. Let's see what you guys are saying. Kermit. So wisdom produces the desire for wisdom to disintegrate into wisdom. Wisdom produces the desire to know the unknown. When wisdom finds its objective, then it ceases to require it to exist. So let's say if you have a ladder, and the ladder wants to get you up to the roof. Well, once you're on the roof, the ladder is not required. So intellect, wisdom, it's to direct the soul's consciousness to the Supreme. And then when the soul's consciousness is affixed to the Supreme successfully, then the intellect disintegrates. It's not required anymore. Does this imply that intellect or wisdom itself must dissolve before the soul can reach its source? It will dissolve, but then you will... Intellect is a function of the soul. It will dissolve. The intellect, which is established for connecting the soul to an extrinsic reality, will dissolve so that the soul can connect itself to an intrinsic, God-based reality. And that connection will be affected by intellect. So there's just an intellect which is pointing this way, or an intellect which is pointing this way. What would happen if the sparks stopped leaving the source? Makes me wonder. I believe you're referring to the swan leaving the other swan. If there were no swans leaving the other swans, you would have no requirement for an extrinsic reality. However, there's always swans leaving the other swan. Otherwise, there's no possibility for it. And if there's no possibility for it, then there's nothing interesting about it. If something could not be any other way except the way that it is, then it's boring. You can take it for granted. And so, therefore, love, excitement, joy, happiness, thrill, passion requires possibilities and autonomy. And this is why there's the possibility to not be aware of God, because if there was not the possibility to not be aware of God, then there would be nothing special about being aware of God. So theoretically, if there were no swans leaving, then there would be no cities built. However, there's always swans leaving. It's a permanent aspect of reality. And it is not regrettable either, because the swans live in the city and they enjoy their life. And if they are unhappy with that, then they can return. There's nothing regrettable about that. There's nothing truly regrettable about it. Now, returning to the... Now it gets very, very interesting. I mean, it's gotten very interesting already. Now it gets super interesting. This is my favorite part, like, of anything that I've read in a very long time. So what the friend told Vidarbi right now is, because you marry an intellect which connects you to a city, you can enjoy everything about the city and the world that the city is in. But that's all you ever know. And that's why you're crying. So that's what he just told her. Your spouse who... Back. We became a Disney movie called Frozen. So Samurai had asked, when you explained the relationship between mind and intellect, you said that mind has to follow the intellect. It depends on what your mind is. When your mind is the source of our passions. Mind is the source for opinion and passion. When the passions are directed towards externals, then the mind will be troubling to the intellect. It will disturb the intellect. But when the mind is married to asiteksha, when the mind marries the desire to perceive the internal, the unknown, then the mind becomes helpful, and the passions and the desires become helpful. So mind is actually a tool, and if it's misused, then it's problematic, and if it's used nicely, then it's helpful. Passions, desires, feelings, emotions, they're not good or bad. It's just whether or not they're pointing towards a mistake or they're pointing towards an accurate thing. All right, so let me see this part. This is the part. Actually, this is pretty amazing that it clipped out right before this. So the people who hear this were stuck around, because this is the best part. So he said, you marry the intellect, and the intellect allows you to experience the world. Because you have an intellect, that intellect allows you to interface with your body and use your body. And because you can use a body, then you can experience the world. So that is wonderful. So you can embrace your lover and fully enjoy it. In other words, you can embrace this world and you can enjoy the world. However, you never learn anything beyond the world. The intellect is wrapped in the world. And that's why you're crying. That's why you've come to this pitiful state. Maybe Eddie, kind of good. I want to get to this next bit though. So now Vidarbhi pleads, what is it that I never learned? I want to put this in past tense. I don't know why. What is it that I never learned? So you never learned anything beyond this world. So now she says, what is it? So he says, you never realize that you are not the daughter of Vidarbha. You never realize that this hero is not your husband. You never realize that you were never the king of Queen Paranjani. So there's interesting things. He said, who are you? Who is this man that you're crying over? And who am I? He asked her 3 questions. She right away said, this man is my husband and my guru. But now he's telling her, you never realized that this man is not your husband or your guru. And she said, who am I? He asked, who am I? And she knew that she didn't know that one. But she thought she knew who the man was. But now he's saying, actually, you never realized that you're not the daughter of Vidarbha. You never realized that this guy is not your husband. And you never realized that in your previous life, those other things weren't you. You were never the king of Queen Paranjani. And then the next thing is my favorite. You never realized that, in fact, you have always simply been a prisoner in a 9-sided cell. So you're thinking that you're the king of a city that has 9 gates? This is the part of the movie, right, where there's been a guy who's sitting on a throne with a crown the whole time, going out through these 9 gates. This is the part of the movie where it shows, where you realize, oh my God, that's just what this guy thinks is going on. What actually is going on is he's sitting in a cell, a jail cell that has 9 sides to it. You never realize that you are not the daughter of Vidarbha, King Vidarbha. You never realize that this hero, let me put king. And princess. You never realize that this hero is not your husband. You never realize that you were never the king of Queen Paranjani. You never realize that, in fact, you have always simply been a prisoner in a 9-sided cell. You never see this reality because you submit yourself to the power of illusion. That's the cell. That's what you're submitted to. That's what you're enchained by. A power that stems from me, from consciousness itself. Illusion is a power of consciousness. And the reason you do this is that you want to believe you are a strong man, an elegant woman, or something in between. So the soul marries the intellect, and because we have intellect, then we can have a body and work a body, and because we have a body, we can go to the mall, we can go to the restaurant, we can go to the party, we can enjoy life. So this intellect allows us to have this body, and this body allows us to enjoy life, and that's amazing, and we enjoy it, except that's it. That's all that we ever know. And what's the part that we don't know? We don't know that we're not really that thing. We don't realize that this intellect is not permanently really ours. It's not really our spouse. It's a temporary thing. We don't realize that the body is not really our self. It's a temporary manifestation of self. We don't realize that actually we're not the king and queen directing the show. We're a prisoner to illusion. And the reason why we have allowed ourselves to become a prisoner of illusion is because we want what illusion can give us, which is the sensation that we're the king and the queen. Now Vidarbhi asks, then what am I really? And the friend says, oh, Swan, yes. Try to see that. You and I are not 2 separate beings. Although we are distinguishable, you are nonetheless me. The truth is that there is not the slightest divide between us ever. When you look in a mirror, you see two of yourself. That is why you and I see ourselves as two. So the note on this: consciousness exists simultaneously as the observer and the observed. Hence, the one entity, consciousness, has these two distinguishable facets: the observer and the observed. A person looking in a mirror is analogous to consciousness as the observer, or Purusha, or God. A person seen in the mirror is analogous to consciousness as the observed, or Prakriti, or soul. The only significant difference between the soul and God is that God is primarily the observer consciousness, and the soul is primarily the observed consciousness. And then it's not written here, but the illusion power is for the soul to think that it's the observer consciousness. Primarily. Of course, everything is a little bit of both. So going back and then skipping the explanation. Oh, Swan, yes. What am I really? Oh, Swan, and let's go back. You never realize that you are not the princess of King Vidarbha. You never realize that this hero is not your husband. You never realize that you were never the king of Queen Paranjani. You never realize that, in fact, you have always simply been a prisoner in a 9-sided cell. You never see this reality because you submit yourself to the power of illusion, a power that stems from me, from consciousness itself. And the reason you do this is that you want to believe you are a strong man, an elegant woman, or something in between. And then Vidarbha asks, then what am I really? Oh, Swan, yes, try to see that. You and I are not two separate beings. Although we are distinguishable, you are nonetheless me. And the truth is that that there is not the slightest divide between us ever. When you look in a mirror, you see two of yourself. And that is why you and I see ourselves as two. And just as the observer can cause the observed in the mirror to move, I, the awakened swan, can awaken you. I can give you knowledge that would destroy your unawareness of me, so that you could become your true self. Narada concluded, O king, I have explained spiritual truth to you using an allegory. The all-attractive, all-manifesting divinity is very fond of artful allegory and metaphor. I'm going to probably put this in the next chapter. I'm just going to shift this paragraph into the next chapter. So that is the end of the whole story, but in the next chapter, the person who heard the story is going to ask some questions about it. That's mind-blowing stuff. Let me see if you have any questions. Dreams is a way to travel. Let me see where it will go. Eddie, did you take the planets course that I did like 1 billion years ago? That had this an allegory built into it. The sun is actually attracted to the earth. This is why it bounces off the moon. And then in order to integrate with the things that the moon shines on, it requires to become Mercury. The sun is attracted to the earth, but the sun is attracted to the dark side of the earth. If we put all this stuff into the astrology metaphor, allegory, sun is consciousness or soul, moon is mind. It allows consciousness to shine into something that it can't directly see, some indirect reality, some illusory reality, which is the darkness of the dark side of the earth. Now that it's shining on and perceiving the dark side of the earth, then it wants to integrate it with it, so it develops intellect. And then from there, it develops senses of perception, Venus, and senses of action, Mars. That's that allegory. And that was way back then. Vic, are dreams a way to travel? Travel is a physical thing, isn't it? Travel means moving your define travel. Doesn't travel mean moving your position in space? So dreams don't move us around. I mean, maybe they make you toss and turn, but they're not like moving you. So I don't think dreams are a way to travel. But the astral travel, all such things, this is because the mind is... There's consciousness, and there's these levels, right? There's consciousness projects onto identity projects onto intellect projects onto opinions, emotions, experience, just mind projects onto the physical reality, which begins with space. Within space, everything is located, so movement happens in space. Mind is the thing that's projecting onto space, so mind can project onto any location in space. Mind is not bound to a location in space. That's why you can't say, I can point to my finger, I can point to my tooth, I can't point to my mind. I can point to my brain, but the brain is a physical tool allowing the mind to affect the body. The brain is not the mind. So astral travel, the dream travel, is just because the mind is not bound to location. And so if you're a master of mind and master of physics via the yoga technologies, then you can locate your consciousness in distant places from where your physical body is. Maybe that's what you're talking about. Is it like the soul's way of unplugging for a while? Not really. It's the body's way of unplugging. The dreams are the body, or the time for the body to rest, but the mind still doesn't rest. This is why there's actually 3 states. It's not 2. Generally, we think there's two states, awake or asleep, but there's 3 states. Awake, asleep, awake, dreaming, and asleep. Dreaming is not really sleeping. Sleeping is when you're not dreaming. And that's just because these things need to rest. The mind also needs to rest. So there'll be a portion of sleep where there's no dreams. I feel like in this moment, I, as well as the 10 other spectators of this live stream, were meant to hear this priceless story. Yes, I do think that was probably the serendipity of the disconnect. Do you think we return to source at night when we shut off or maybe partake in higher illusions? I feel this rushing feeling when I fall asleep sometimes. You return to... Your mind becomes liberated from its physical constraints, so you can feel something like that. Yep, I've been too busy this week, but I'm going to do the Mind and Planets today. The Jupiter and Pisces. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Heidi. Lil One, this is past the life lessons. This is, when we're finished with this, I'll publish this. There's a couple more chapters to go. Yep, and I feel that even though a lot of you guys heard this, you didn't really hear it. So maybe you can rewatch it, but this takes millions of years, thousands of years, 36,000 years meditation to begin to grasp. I encourage you to meditate on it. I will take my leave.